It was an ordinary afternoon in the dry, barren land of the American Southwest. The sun shone relentlessly overhead, casting long shadows on the cracked earth below. Daniel, a poor farmer, trudged home after a long day's work. His boots, worn thin from years of labor, kicked up dust as he walked along the old dirt path that led to his small home. He didn't have much to look forward to, other than the few meager crops he could manage to grow and the small shelter he called home. Life had never been kind to Daniel, but he made do. Daniel was alone. His family had long passed, leaving him with only memories and the land that had been in his family for generations. Though the land was small, Daniel worked it tirelessly, hoping one day it would give him something to show for his labor. But that day never seemed to come. Each season the crops were either too few or ruined by unpredictable weather. Still, Daniel had a stubborn streak. He refused to give up. He had seen hardship before, but he knew he could survive as long as he had his land and his willpower. On that day, as he made his way into town to pick up a few necessities, Daniel noticed something unusual. Off to the side of the road, sitting beneath a large gnarled tree, was a woman. She was hunched over, her head down, and her shoulders trembled as if she was crying. Daniel's heart softened when he saw her. People in town often ignored the less fortunate, passing by without a second glance, but something about this woman made him stop. He had seen suffering in his life, but there was something different about the way this woman sat in the shade of the tree. As he drew closer, he could hear the soft sound of her sobs. Her clothes were torn and faded, hardly able to shield her from the hot sun. Her face was streaked with dirt, and her hair hung loosely, tangled from days, perhaps weeks, of neglect. She seemed to be an Apache woman, her skin a dark bronze, a contrast to her hollowed cheeks and the deep sadness in her eyes. Daniel approached her cautiously, unsure of what to say or do. She looked up at him as he drew near, her face revealing a mixture of shame and fear. Her eyes were red from crying, and she quickly wiped at her face as if she didn't want to be seen in such a vulnerable state. When their eyes met, she seemed to shrink back, almost as if she was afraid of what he might say. "Please, sir," she said, her voice shaky and soft. "Don't spend your money on me. I don't deserve it. I have nothing left, and there is no hope for me." Her words hit Daniel harder than he expected. He had heard of people asking for help, but the way she spoke felt different. It was as if she was asking for forgiveness, not charity. Her eyes were full of sorrow, and Daniel could see the struggle within her. She didn't want to accept any help. It was clear that she carried some kind of pain that went far beyond her immediate needs. For a moment, Daniel just stood there, unsure of how to respond. He had little money to his name, and times were tough for him as well. His own farm was barely surviving, but he couldn't just walk away from her. He could see that she was in desperate need of something, anything to ease her suffering. Despite his own struggles, Daniel felt an overwhelming urge to help. The harsh reality of his own poverty was never far from his mind, but seeing this woman sitting there, so broken and defeated, moved him deeply. She looked as if she had lost everything, but still she refused help. Her pride and dignity were clearly important to her, and yet it seemed she was willing to let them go, perhaps because she felt she no longer deserved anything good. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out the few coins he had left. He didn't have much, just enough to buy a loaf of bread for the next few days. But at that moment, the thought of keeping the money for himself felt selfish. He could see in the woman's eyes that she wasn't asking for a handout. She wasn't begging for food, shelter, or anything specific. She was simply asking for compassion. With a sigh, Daniel walked up to her, his heart pounding. He had never been in a position where he had to choose between his own survival and helping someone else, but now was that moment. He extended his hand toward her, pressing the few coins into her palm. "Please," he said softly, "take this. It's not much, but I hope it helps." For a moment, the woman just stared at the coins in her hand as if she couldn't believe what was happening. Her lips trembled and she looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mix of disbelief and gratitude. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you help me when you have so little yourself?" Daniel smiled softly, the weight of her words hanging in the air. "Because," he said, "everyone deserves kindness even when there's nothing left. Maybe especially when there's nothing left." The woman's face crumpled and tears began to fall again. But these were not tears of despair. They were tears of relief, of an emotion she hadn't felt in a long time, hope. She closed her fingers around the coins, clutching them tightly as if they were a lifeline. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know how to repay you." Daniel shook his head. "You don't have to. Just take care of yourself. That's enough for me." With that, he turned and walked away, his heart strangely light. He had done something good, something that would stay with him for the rest of his life. As he continued his walk to town, he couldn't help but think about the woman. Who was she? How had she ended up in such a state? He didn't know, but he knew one thing. He had done the right thing. And somehow that made the world seem a little less bleak. The woman's words haunted him as he went about his day. How had she ended up in such despair? What was it that had made her give up hope so completely that she had to beg in the middle of the street? He couldn't stop thinking about her. But as he purchased the few items he needed from the town market and made his way home, he realized something. In helping her, he had not only given her money but had given her a reason to believe in kindness again. That, he thought, was something that could change a person's life. He didn't know it then, but this small act of kindness would eventually change both of their lives in ways they could never have imagined. As days passed, Daniel's life returned to its familiar rhythm. The heavy work of tending to his small farm, with its unpredictable harvests, took up most of his time. Every day he spent long hours under the sun, hoping that his crops would grow strong enough to sustain him through another season. But even with his tireless efforts, the outcome was often uncertain. Some days it felt like everything he did was in vain, and the challenges seemed to multiply. Yet, as hard as life was, Daniel felt a sense of peace. He had his land, the little he could grow from it, and the simple satisfaction that came from working with his hands. It was a humble life, but it was his. There was something comforting about the steady routine, even though it didn't provide him with much material wealth. Despite the struggles, Daniel couldn't shake the memory of the woman he had helped. Her tear-streaked face and desperate words lingered in his mind. He often wondered what had become of her. Was she still in the town? Had she found a way to survive? Or had her situation worsened? He hadn't expected anything in return for his kindness, but a small part of him hoped she was doing better. He hoped she had found some peace, some solace after all the pain she had experienced. Weeks went by, and Daniel gradually put the memory of that brief encounter to the back of his mind. He focused on his work, on the daily grind of life. Then one evening, as the sun began to set and the sky turned a soft golden color, he noticed something unusual. A group of people was walking down the dirt road toward his home. At first, he thought they might be travelers passing through, but as they got closer, he recognized the woman from that day. Her face was no longer marked by the despair that had once consumed her. There was a certain strength in her step, a calmness about her that Daniel had not seen before. Her clothes, though still simple, were cleaner, and her hair was neatly tied back. The ragged look that had once defined her was gone, replaced by a quiet dignity. She wasn't alone either. With her were several other people, all of them dressed in traditional Apache clothing. The woman walked toward Daniel, her eyes meeting his with an intensity he hadn't expected. It was clear that she had been thinking about this moment for some time. She came to a stop before him, her hands clasped in front of her as if she were presenting something. "Sir," she said, her voice calm and steady, "I have come to thank you for your kindness. I have not forgotten what you did for me, and I want to show you my gratitude." Daniel was taken aback. He had not expected this at all. He had given her what little he could spare, expecting nothing in return, and yet here she was, standing before him, offering something more than he could have imagined. "You don't have to thank me," Daniel said, his voice soft, almost unsure of how to respond. "I only did what anyone would do." The woman smiled, a soft, knowing smile that reached her eyes. "No," she said, shaking her head. "You gave me more than just money. You gave me hope. You showed me that there are still good people in this world. That is something I can never repay with words alone." She then turned to the group of people behind her. They too looked at Daniel with respect. There was a quiet understanding among them, a sense of shared history and culture. They had been watching the exchange and were clearly in agreement with the woman's words. "I've returned to my people," she continued. "They helped me regain my strength. I had nothing left, but now I have something to offer. It's not much, but it's all I can give." One of the people with her, a man who seemed to be a leader of sorts, stepped forward holding a small bundle wrapped in cloth. The woman gestured to it and then looked back at Daniel. "I've brought this for you," she said. Food. It's not much, but it's what we could gather. Please accept it as a small token of my appreciation. Daniel stood in stunned silence. His mind raced. She had come all this way, brought food from her people and offered it to him. Someone who, just a few weeks ago, had nothing to give her but a few coins. It wasn't about the food. It was the gesture, the symbol of something far greater than any material possession. The bundle was opened, and inside, Daniel saw an array of fresh fruits, vegetables, and dried meat, food that was a luxury in these parts. It wasn't the kind of food Daniel could have afforded to buy on his own, and yet, here it was in front of him. He was humbled. I don't know what to say, he whispered, overwhelmed by her generosity. You don't have to say anything, the woman replied gently. This is simply my way of showing you that your kindness mattered. It didn't just change my life. It changed the lives of those around me. Daniel's heart swelled. This wasn't just about a single act of charity. It was about how one simple moment of compassion could create a ripple effect, spreading out to touch the lives of others in ways he could never have imagined. The woman's life had been transformed, and in turn she had brought that change back to her community. I didn't do anything special, Daniel said, feeling awkward. I only helped when I saw someone in need. And that's exactly why it was so special, the woman replied, her voice steady but full of emotion. You didn't look away. You didn't turn your back on me when everyone else did. That's what makes you different. The group of people behind the woman nodded in agreement, their faces warm with appreciation. Daniel felt his chest tighten with emotion, unable to put into words how deeply moved he was by their kindness. I didn't expect anything in return, Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. I just wanted to help. I didn't know. I didn't know it would lead to this. The woman smiled again, a quiet smile of understanding. That's how kindness works. It doesn't expect anything in return. It just flows, and it creates something beautiful in its wake. With that, the woman and her people turned to leave. Daniel stood there for a long time, watching them walk away. His heart was full, but there was also a sense of peace. He had done something small, something simple, and it had led to a connection that went far beyond anything he could have imagined. That evening, as Daniel sat down to the meal the woman had brought him, he reflected on the day. His farm was still small, his life still simple, but in that moment he felt richer than he had ever felt before. Kindness had given him a gift, one far greater than any material wealth. It had given him the knowledge that even in the darkest times, a single act of compassion could bring light, and as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a soft glow over the land, Daniel knew that his life had been changed forever. The ripple effect of kindness had spread, and in doing so, it had connected him to something much larger than himself.